What is the spiritual psychology of relationships? If you are curious to know how does it actually play out from a soul perspective, from a spiritual perspective, what's the meaning of a relationship? How do we actually have our relationships thrive? Why do some people work, really well in relationship? Some people don't at all. Some people have massive dysfunction, and many people are actually in relationship or married and miserable, right? So what's the secret behind the secret, if you will, of relationships? So we're going to dive deep into this. So you definitely want to listen or watch this podcast. Welcome to the Dr. Erin Show. May you live your truth. Hi there. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Erin, Doctor of Divinity and Master Spiritual Psychology Coach. And today's podcast is going to be brief. I have an entire podcast series on relationship mastery, but today I want to come in and briefly break down the basics of the spiritual psychology of relationships. The truth is, all of life is a relationship, and we all deeply care about our relationships, whether it be in our intimate partnership, our marriage, our dating, family, friends, whatever. The truth is, all of life is a relationship, but the primary relationship is within you and your higher self, with you and source. All other relationships are the projection and reflection of your ability or inability to love. So let's break this on down. First, I want to share a little bit of my personal journey in relationship. I grew up raised by my single mom, and she was very, very codependent in relationship. I remember her being in and out of relationship, and what would happen is when she'd be getting into a relationship, she would be super high on life. It would be like, she was at her best self, and then the dysfunction would begin in the codependency. They'd get in a lot of arguments. They'd break up. She would be really sad. And then she'd get high again off of being single. And then she would get back in a relationship, right? So these were the patterns that I saw. My father was in marriages, multiple marriages, and would completely abandon us to go off to this, right? Not being a victim or talking about this as if, we all have our stuff, and I've made complete peace with my parents, and I love them, and I recognize they did the best they could do off of the parenting that they have. But the difference in spiritual psychology, because we're not looking at what happened with our circumstance, with our parents, with everything, that's traditional psychology. Okay. So really, I tell you this because that's all story. One child coming from that relationship may decide to have powerful relationships and be in really thriving relationships because they decided, right? They decided, I'm going to have a powerful relationship, right? Another child coming from that exact same situation would not thrive at all in relationship. So in spiritual psychology, we're looking at things a little bit different than traditional psychology. What we're looking for is the identity that was decided out of all the different dysfunction and traumatic incidents in childhood, right? So for me, my personal commands growing up in, that I decided of my limited beliefs and my limited identity was one, I'm not lovable. Right. I really decided something's wrong with me. If my parents get divorced, if, whatever, my mom's boyfriends are more important than us sometimes, I must not be lovable. Right. So these are the decisions that I made out of it. And what happened was I was very insecure. I ended up getting in a lot of dysfunctional relationships, even in high school. And then I thought, well, all my problems will be solved if I get married, because that's what I had seen in the indoctrination of the culture. So I married somebody that I barely knew. We got pregnant, as you guys know, with my, full-term stillborn son that sent me on the spiritual journey. And that's when I began to really dive into doing my deep inner work. We got divorced when my son was 2, and it's been a long, long journey, and recognizing the spiritual psychology and universal law and metaphysics of relationships. So today I want to just share some distinctions that have helped me really become completely unconditionally loving to myself, really accepting and unconditionally loving every single person in my life, being able to be discerning and place boundaries on people so that I can stay in my power, no longer handing my power over to relationship, but also viewing relationship and realizing that it is a beautiful masterclass to develop the consciousness. So let's break on down some distinctions. So again, the first distinction that really changed my viewpoint on relationship is recognizing that I'm the creator of my relationships, right? Everyone has the ability to create. We have the ability to be discerning of who we choose to be in a relationship. We also are creating it from a perspective of our identity. Because the truth is that all relationships, again, are really a projection and reflection of what's happening. For me, if I came from the belief that I'm not worthy of love, either one of two things would happen. I would either call in somebody that was not even available, right? That really was a dysfunctional person, regardless, to fulfill that self-fulfilling prophecy of I'm not lovable. Or I would call in somebody that really was able to love, but I couldn't even receive it. So I would sabotage it or push them away regardless, right? So after working with so many clients and being trained, I've trained over 10,000 coaches now, soul-based coaches, in different levels of programs. And the core principle is recognizing that the primary relationship, I mean, all of life is a relationship, which means how are you relating to it? How do you relate to life? That's the relationship. Okay. So the primary relationship is with you and your higher self. How do you view yourself? Because that's the merging of into the one self-love, the unconditional non-judging of yourself. So if you have insecurities with yourself, if you're judging yourself, if you're feeling the effect of life, the effect of your relationships, then that's going to project out into your relationship. So the primary relationship is with your higher self. All other relationships are really to have you view your ability or inability to love. Okay. That doesn't mean you put yourself in relationships with people who are dysfunctional because you're like, I can just love unconditionally. No, you are discerning and you place boundaries on relationships so that you can stay in your ability to love yourself. This is the masterclass of life. So also in spiritual psychology, we recognize that the spirituality is recognizing that everything's caused from first cause, spirit, source, your true self. So spirit creates from nothing. Spirit can never be the effect of the past. So say you've had some bad relationships, you've had some hard breakups. The truth is that pure consciousness has to hold the pure potential of all relationships, right? So it means that we need to clear out the soul, heal thyself, know thyself, and be able to create from nothingness. So we really want to ask ourselves, what do I really desire to create? Do I desire to merge into soul, right, with another person in a deep, intimate relationship? And the deeper we're able to experience ourselves, the deeper we're able to be in intimacy with other people. So the first thing that happens when I'm working with clients in the school and things is 9 out of 10 of the women and men are dealing with codependency or some level of dysfunction. They have handed their power over to their relationship. So they're constantly up and down according to their relationship. So the first thing to heal is, of course, the big traumas and to basically become somebody who is healing their codependency. What is codependency? Codependency is where you're handing your power over to your relationships. You're looking for validation. Your happiness is contingent on that. You're making them the source of your joy, and therefore you're making them instantaneously the source of your suffering. So we've got to heal the codependency first. We've got to heal the trauma. We've got to heal, big boulders in the subconscious mind, in the soul. Then once we do that, we can get really clear of what we call our life's manual in the school, getting clear of our core values, getting clear of what are our deal breakers, our standards, and our ideal scene in our relationships. In your intimate relationship, your marriage or dating is going to be different than your relationship, say, with your friends or your relationship with your family or your relationship with your peers. You need to make sure to be able to create your life's manual, being able to really get clear your core values, your standards, your policy, procedures in all those areas so that you can powerfully not make other people wrong, but hold your boundaries and your standards and be discerning of who you get into relationship with. Okay, so you've done your deep trauma work. You began to heal your codependency. You've created your life's manual. And then what we want to do is start living the principles. We always say it's different to know the truth versus living the truth. This is where the rubber meets the pavement, meaning you got to actually live these principles, and you can't do it outside a relationship. I remember Werner Erhard had a great distinction. Relationships are like swimming. You can plan them all out. You can do whatever. You're sitting on the side of the deep end, but the only way to actually do relationships is to dive into the deep end. So now it's about practicing the principles. So again, to really heal my codependency, after I got divorced, I got into a really dysfunctional relationship. I tell my story of being engaged with a very famous rock star that was very very, very dysfunctional. And hence, I wanted to point my finger at him. And guess what? Three fingers were pointing back at me because I was codependent. So now we get to live the principles. And it doesn't matter if you're married, single, dating, in whatever relationship, these principles apply to everybody. I have relationships, married couples that come to me, people who are dating or people who just want to find, their partner. And the work is the same regardless. And just because somebody's married does not mean they're thriving. In fact, quite the opposite. The stats show that only 15% of marriages really are thriving. Okay. So you want to know that the grass isn't greener and that you need to do the work regardless if you're single or married or anything. And the principles go like this. When you do your life's manual and you're getting really clear of where you don't do well at all, the environments for your must-haves and your ideal scene, you have to take responsibility around those. So I remember when I went through 12 steps and getting really clear of healing my codependency, I had to take full responsibility, right? So I had to begin to look at where do I thrive and what do I need to make sure that I'm doing to take care of myself. I can't hand that over to somebody else. And when we get into these things, we have to communicate. Communication is the solvent for all relationships. And the more you communicate and you get to know yourself and you get to know your relationship, you get to know, your family members or your partner when you're dating or married, you're going to understand what they need to be thriving, what you need, and it may be different. And you need to come to a place where you're able to honor their truth, their relative truth, and honor your relative truth. There's ultimate truth, like you are one, right? Energy can't be destroyed. We're eternal immortal, but there's relative truth. And each person in a relationship has a relative truth. So the big, masterclass of relationship is honoring other people's truth, finding the commonality and really focusing on the commonality and celebrating people and building off of the strengths of the commonality and knowing there's going to be differences. There's not one person on this planet that's going to be perfect where you merge everything identical, right? So the truth in spiritual psychology of relationships is recognizing that this is a place to evolve, to grow, to become really the highest consciousness. And every relationship is for growth. So I'm not here from a religious standpoint to say you need to be married before intimacy. I'm not here to tell you this is exactly the way you should do it. These are exactly the boundaries you should take. In spiritual psychology, we really help birth the client's truth. Okay. So in that, recognize there's work to be done. Again, there's work to be done in doing your trauma work to really release the big boulders that are going to be projecting and reflecting back. There's codependency and dysfunctional, healing that needs to happen. You need to birth and get really clear of your life's manual. What works for you? Where do you thrive? What don't you thrive in? And then living the principles every day. So things like not complaining, but rather communicating and realizing that if the moment that you judge somebody else or resist them or try to control them or try and change them or fix them, it's not going to work. That spiritual law and universal law teaches us that what we resist persists, and that if we view our partner or our friend or a family member and we judge them, will instantly cause division in mind. So our practice is to get into spiritual mind treatment, get our mind right, come into the unification, see everybody as their divinity, see everybody as the perfection that they are. We're not going to be perfect at this. We're human beings, right? But we practice the principles. We take accountability. We make amends. We get back on track. We make visions. We set goals with our partners or things, and we really get back into knowing the divine power that we are, the infinite creators, and that we always have choice. And that when we choose to create a life with somebody, or we choose to advance in our friendship with somebody, or we choose to really, celebrate our family, or go away from relationships, go away from certain family members. Maybe there's really dysfunctional. We can love them from afar, right? And so that's a big distinction. I always share that one of the big distinctions of me healing in my relationship with one of the biggest codependent relationships I had was realizing that I could still love him and not be in relationship with him, meaning it wasn't working. It was very dysfunctional, but I could still love him unconditionally, but still know that my boundaries I needed for myself because I wasn't thriving in that relationship. Okay. So let's just take a deep breath in. The universal law lesson of this week is a law of forgiveness. And this is probably the most important thing in moving forward in your relationships. You have to forgive any of your past, any of your exes, any of your family members to move forward. Because when we don't forgive somebody, that means that we've handed our power over to them and made ourselves the effect of them. That is codependency. So I recognize in this law of forgiveness that I release all judgment. I release and I forgive everyone. That doesn't mean that I don't hold them accountable, but I forgive them because I release any consideration that I am the effect of anyone because I am a divine, almighty creator. And I know and recognize right here that I choose to know that the most important relationship in my life is with Source, with God, Source within, with the I am, with my highest self, because that is the only place I actually get love from. That is the only place that I actually can bring my highest self, my fullest self, my healed self into a relationship. That is the only place that I can actually know that I can no longer be the effect of anyone, that I am responsible. I am responsible for my emotions. I'm responsible to place myself in relationship with healthy human beings that are willing to move forward and do the work. I am here knowing right here, right now that I forgive everything and everyone, my parents, everything. They did the best they can. I choose to love them unconditionally. I see the perfection of everything they went through. And in today, recognizing the perfection and love and holiness of all of my relationships. I'm knowing absolutely thriving relationships, thriving lives. I release and know the only source of love is within. Everything else is a projection and a reflection of my ability to receive the love. It is done, as together we say. And so it is. And so it is. Okay, you guys, if you are new to this podcast, you can grab the free link to the Universal Law Calendar below. You can also join Soul Society membership. We still have founding membership pricing that's going to be going up by the first of the year. You can come in and get certified in SPPC, meaning spiritual psychology practitioner coaching, and the E4 method. You can binge also many of the different podcast series. We do this once a week. It's 11 minutes to 22 minutes. Get your mind right, come together. And you can also download the app, come into the community. There's a free section on there as well. Get your mind right, state what you got from the podcast, whatever there is for you. And just know that I love you guys. Have a beautiful day and may you live your truth.